I'm Deepali Dewan, the Dan Mishra Curator of South Asian Art and Culture at the Royal Ontario Museum, and I'm delighted you could join us for today's Curator Conversation, a new digital platform that explores themes and subjects from ROM's collections alongside industry professionals. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the ROM sits on what has been the ancestral lands of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabeg Nation, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation since time immemorial to today. In a moment, we will broadcast a pre-recorded conversation between myself and Delhi-based Canadian designer, Rashmi Varma. Rashmi is a fashion designer, artist, curator, and author, among other things. This multi-talented individual was based in Canada for many years before picking up and settling in New Delhi, India, where she created her own women's wear label and is still going strong today. What has always drawn me to Rashmi's work is her sensitivity to historical aesthetics of the Indian subcontinent, and it comes through in whatever she does. We feature Rashmi today as a way to mark an important new exhibition at the ROM called Cloth That Changed the World, India's Painted and Printed Cottons. It features superb historical and contemporary examples of block printed and hand painted decorative cotton textiles from India that were used from temple hangings to home furnishings and high fashion. And it shows how this humble fabric truly shaped the modern economy.
So hi, Rashmi. I feel like we've known each other for a really long time. We met soon after I came to Toronto in 2002. And you've had an incredible journey as an artist, a designer, a fashion artist, if I could say. And so I want to ask you about your journey first. Can you talk about sort of what led you to design and now to clothing and fashion and textile arts?
I spent a lot of my childhood traveling to India. I was born in Canada, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and, during that time we would go back and forth a lot. So I think, this sort of love for clothing and beautiful things and travel in India sort of all started at an early age. I wanted to study fashion but my parents didn't really, think that was like a viable career option. So I ended up studying political science, here in Montreal. And from there I went into interior design, studied interior design, because again, we didn't think that fashion was like the right career path. And, with interiors, I would likely get some more work happening. So I studied, political science and interiors, and I moved to Toronto in 1999, and that's kind of when I began my work career, my life. My first job was with an architect and then with an interior design firm. But, I always, of course, had this sort of love and obsession for clothing. And, after working in interiors and architecture for a few years, where I actually also wasn't able to see, immediate results of my work. And, I was really into wanting to make things by my own hands. I slowly started getting into clothing and just kind of teaching myself and, working with other designers and freelancing and just, experimenting with things. So that's kind of when I really started, I would say the early 2000s, getting into clothing. And then at the same time, I also joined SAVAC, the South Asian Visual Arts Collective at the time. And so that kind of then, with clothing, now with the visual arts, with the focus on South Asia, that sort of all started to develop into what, I think I do today. Then that led me into more of a film and theater career. And I always knew that I wanted to have a clothing line. And I tried doing that in 2005. I went to India for 6 months and I made a small capsule collection. And that's when you and I actually, I think we started connecting more over that. I made a few pieces, I brought them back to Canada, I tried it all out, and it went really well, but I wasn't able to sustain myself on it. So I kind of gave up having my own clothing line for a while, and I focused on work here, trying to make a living.
In Canada.
in Canada, but I always knew that, you know what, maybe one day I'm going to go back to India and try this again. And that happened in 2012. You know, I packed up everything here and I said, okay, I'm going to move to Delhi. I'm going to start a clothing line. Things in India at that time were very exciting in terms of fashion and craft and textile and the visual arts. I moved to Delhi because also I was, you know, was familiar with Delhi. I have family there. And it is a city that, you know, has a lot of garment manufacturing happenings. It's also the capital of India. So there was a lot, you know, many reasons to be there for work. It's not the most exciting city to live in, and it's definitely, I think, difficult for a woman, a single woman, to move there and set up her own business. But the entire country is full of, you know, incredible craft, incredible knowledge, incredible skill, and so to be able to tap into all of that and to incorporate all of that into your work, and, you know, have these collaborations, you know, with you and other sort of craft, you know, creatives, that was all very, very exciting and enticing for me. You can do that here in Canada, but at a, you know, but at a much, much, much smaller scale. Like, you know, the access that we have, you know, to craft in India, you don't have that here.
You know, I remember early on when I met you, you know, I felt like some of the pieces you were creating had a great sense of structure. And embroidery was something that I think you really used quite a bit to add elements to your pieces. And then over the years, it feels like it's evolved into something that is very flowy and about draping and about, but in some ways that itself has a structure to it too. And then there's elements of structure. So why don't we look at some of your pieces and you can take us through some of the things that you're interested in and that you like to work with.
Yes, of course.
Tell us what we're looking at here.
So this is a campaign image from Collection 5, which we did in 2018. And we have the model here wearing a smocked outfit that we made out of this beautiful hand-woven gold tissue. And she's standing on top of a house called the Copper House, which was built by one of, you know, my favorite architects in India right now, Studio Mumbai. You know, and of course here she is against this really gorgeous backdrop. It's photographed by a dear friend of mine, Patna Singh. And it sort of encompasses so many of the things that, you know, I truly love. Again, you know, great garments, you know, architecture, nature, light, and it's all sort of coming together here. And the handmade, you know.
So this is a shirt and a skirt, and it's a little far away, but the details on the shirt part, is that folding, scrunching, embroidery? Like, exactly what are we looking at the top?
It's a smocked jumper. So it's a gold tissue that we've hand smocked, you know, at the front yoke and throughout the arms, and then just a simple sort of pleated gold skirt she's wearing with it. And this is a tissue that was hand woven in Chanderi, you know, which would normally be used for saris and, let's say, you know, drapey garments. But here we've manipulated the fabric into a classic sort of, you know, smocking technique, and just made this kind of cool, you know, jumper and skirt with it.
What I love, what I've noticed is that the contexts in which you photograph garments and models wearing your garments, I find is also always very evocative. There's always like a lot of clean lines, modernist shapes to the architecture or architectural contexts. And I've always found it, I've loved the way kind of you've played with the modern and what could be seen of as not modern. I don't even want to say traditional, but the not modern, but at the same time making it modern in a way that comes together. Maybe we can look at a few details of the other images that you have.
Of course, of course. I also want to say one more thing about this image is the model that we've used, you know, with again, fashion and, you know, traditional images of beauty. We've also, you know, we're looking at different faces and different women, you know, from the South Asia, and also just challenging, you know, what typical Indian beauty is. And so, you know, that is also an important part of this image.
So you really design and curate the whole kind of
Yes, yes.
session.
I mean, I definitely collaborate, with a great team of other creatives. There's, Malika Verma Kashyap from Border and Fall. And as I mentioned, the photographer Pratna Singh. And we all sort of, we definitely all have creative visions, but we all, I think just, we're all on the same wavelength. So, when we all come together, on these sets and on these shoots, some sort of magic does happen for sure.
So tell us about these.
Yeah, so definitely, draping is, of course, very key, important aspect of my work. And of course that, we draw from the sari, and I'm constantly drawing from the sari or the drape of a pallu, or, the dhoti, or, a dupatta, whatever it may be. So, how do we translate that drape into other garments? Be it like on the left side, the gray jersey dress, which is, a very easy dress to wear, but again, elegantly draped around her body. And, again, these are shapes and forms. For me, it's a form of sculpture. Looking at how drape forms look on the body, and then how we translate that onto a garment. And then on the right side, the 2x1 sari is, so as I was saying, that the sari has been a huge source of inspiration for me. One dress that we've made, and it's been very successful for us, has been the sari dress, which kind of combines the, drape and structure of a sari with tailoring, like with Western dressmaking. And that is—
So what exactly is tailored? Like, when someone says sari dress, that's such an evocative term.
Yeah, yes. So, it's like, it's tailored, that there's a bodice that you would have in like a very traditional kind of Western dress, right? The bodice is a structured, the structure that is on the top of the body. And then I've added pleats and a pallu, which you would see in a sari, to this. And I mean, the idea of the sari dress is not, something completely new, and certainly did not invent it, but our take on it, and I will show you an image of it later on, is a very simplified, it's very simple, but very elegant and easy to wear. So, I also need to think about all these things, is how it's going to look on a woman's body, and how is she going to be able to, maneuver in it and wear it in her everyday life. So the sari dress has become a really good sort of, solution to many things. But the 2x1 sari here on the right side is, came a little bit after I made the sari dress. And this is actually this is 5 meters of fabric with a built-in blouse on one end. So she drapes the fabric around her body, and then, she kind of puts the blouse on, which is attached to the whole thing. So this is more of a draped garment than I would say a structured tailored garment. Whereas the Kutmu dress on the left is just a one-piece stitched garment. So here on the 2x1, she has to do a little bit of work, and she should know how to drape a sari on herself. And there was this really excellent project that I worked on called the Sari series by Border and Fall, where we documented about 85 ways to drape a sari. So I often tell, clients of mine, because they're like, how are we going to drape this thing? I said, go check out the Sari series, and, you'll have lots of ideas for drape. So
I find that, the sari itself is such an iconic form that I find in recent years, I've noticed it's experiencing quite a revival. I want to say revival, but it's almost like women in India, and I think the South Asian diaspora, are really embracing the sari in new ways, to the point of making a point of wearing it and posting photos of themselves on Instagram or other social media. And there seems to be like a real embracing of it. But at the same time, I think the idea of the sari dress, I think, has encouraged maybe a new generation also to take that up. Would you say that have you found that as well?
Definitely. There's been a revival of, look, the majority of, there are millions and millions of women who are wearing, the sari throughout India. When you look at the urban centers, however, when we look at a certain group of women, there definitely the numbers have gone down, but then there has been this revival, especially with younger women, I think, to embrace the sari, to wear it to parties or events and things like that. So you may not see them wearing it on the streets. And again, I'm talking about a certain segment of society. But certainly, like you said, there's now this sort of idea idea of embrace the sari, photograph yourself in it, post it on Instagram. The sari series, I think, has been really, you know, instrumental in within all of this, is that it's this incredible resource. You can go and look at 85 ways to drape a sari, you know, and suddenly the possibilities are endless for you. So all of this has kind of created this kind of culture around, I think, drape and the drape, and I think the everyday. And, you know, the sari dress itself, you know, I should say that I never meant it to be a replacement to a sari. I want women to wear saris on one day, and then she can wear, you know, the sari dress on another day. For me, it was, you know, from a design perspective, it was just about bringing two different kind of, you know, garment techniques together, right? The Western dressmaking, and of course the drape of the sari. So two structures, bringing it together, you know, in a really kind of clean and simplified manner, and seeing where that goes. It became kind of like our signature. I didn't mean it to become the signature for Rashmi Varma, because there are all these other exciting things that I love doing and, you know, working on. Anyways, I'll show you.
It was the sari dress that was displayed at the Victoria and Albert Museum in their Fabric of India exhibition, wasn't it?
Yes, yes, certainly. And I will show you an image of that.
Some more images.
Yes. Here is a campaign image from collection 3. And, you know, and I have to say that, you know, with a lot of the garments, we try, you know, using as much natural fibers as we can, and a lot of hand woven materials, especially with our cottons. You know, they're often hand woven. Sometimes they are khadi, which is both hand spun and hand woven. Embroidery plays a huge, you know, role in my work, and I think that's partially also because we have access to so many great karigars, embroidery artisans, you know, within Delhi, and it becomes a way for you to create your own fabrics, right? If you're going to do it at the textile level when it's being woven, or, you know, for someone like me, I'm able to kind of create some surface forms and embellishments through embroidery. And that's so this image that you're seeing, we shot this in a Kalari Payatu pit. I think that's probably not the correct word, but Kalari Payatu, you know, set place, which is usually below ground, underground, you know, and it's, and here we're working with this contemporary Bharatanatyam dancer, and so she's wearing one of the garments, and she's on the, you know, she's doing this incredible thing with her body, and you have a Kalari Payatu artist dancer, you know, at the side of the image. And, you know, I think it's just again about, you know, looking at, you know, types of women, things that we can do with our bodies, talk about a certain type of strength and empowerment, looking at different traditions that we don't want to, you know, traditions of, let's say, dance and martial art and garments, and how do those all come together? So I think this image kind of, for me, is
and you want your garments to be able to convey that and allow women to do that.
Absolutely, you know.
Let's see some more images.
Yeah, of course. Here, I'll just push this over to the side. Oh, so, you know, another, you know, from the first image with the image, the first image where the woman was wearing the gold outfit, you know, that was a smocked jumper. And here, this on the left, we have the smock kurta and churidar. Again, so it's just about playing with smocking and, you know, fabric manipulation. So it's not always just about embroidery and embellishment or weave, but we also, you know, like to play around with the structure of the fabric itself, and smocking is like a great way to do it. And again, you know, we're looking at the kurta pajama or the kurta and the churidar, but we're giving it our own sort of language to it. You know, I love to draw from these, you know, traditional or older Indian garments, and then of course do my own thing to it. And, you know, I often don't work with a lot of color, but every collection I will try to put in, you know, 1 or 2 elements of color. And when I do it, I like to do it like full on, head to toe. So we see that here with the smock kurta and churidar. And then collection 6 here on the right, the bandhani in process. Again, another technique of, you know, tie and dye, which I absolutely love. And so we started experimenting with it at the studio towards collection 6. And again, using a color that I normally, I would not gravitate towards. But I think spending so much time in India, and I don't want to get into the cliche of color, but yeah, as spending so much time in India, color, I've become more and more comfortable with the use of color, and I understand its context and what the light does, and all my So here's an in-process shot of Bandhani.
And I think what's interesting here is that in some ways you've created a structure that normally in the technique of Bandhani ends up becoming a flat fabric, right, after the tie-dye. And in some ways in your garments, that structure stays.
Exactly.
Stays. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, this one, we opened most of the Bandhani. So you do have the flat dots, but I decided to keep, because I loved, the structure and the texture of it with the beads tied in. We left a little bit of that, and it was just this interesting. Unfortunately, I don't have an image of the finished piece. Again, Corona, so we weren't able to finish this collection, but we're going to get back to it soon enough. So I'll go on to the next image.
Wait to see what that looks like.
Me too. Me too. Embroidery, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, of course, I'm always looking at textile histories, and I'm always fascinated by history of textiles and its trade, and how aesthetics changed between different nations, and between what colonialism did, and what trade did to aesthetics, and the visual language. So again, I like to look at those things and try to incorporate that into my work. So here on the left, we have just a unfinished garment, or the fabric, which we've embroidered, with a Dutch, I think it's a 17th century Dutch funeral dress that had this chintz pattern on it. I've modified it, a little bit. It's not exactly as is, but chintz also plays a really I love it. It's so beautiful. How can you not?
That's the floral, what's known as a floral fabric that often combines sort of European design and Indian florals, and with some Chinese and Persian elements in it.
Exactly. And we know chintz actually was always hand drawn and hand painted. And again, not what I've done here is I've just put it into embroidery. Of course, I've changed the colors of it. I've manipulated the design of it. So it is just,
But this is a black fabric with white embroidery on it.
Exactly, right? So chintz, we know that, would be colors, usually on a white or a beige background with a certain color palette. And, and again, other designers also are, drawing from chintz and other elements of history. But I think, we all have our own take on it. And for me, I love black and white, and I love to see how these images or these, designs start to look on black and white. Which was, then takes me over to the Shisha jumper, which was from collection number 2. And again, this was drawing from, the Shisha work of Gujarat, of the Kutch region. Spent a lot of time sort of traveling and visiting the area. And again, just putting, this kind of structure, this embellishment onto black. I do love working a lot with black. And kind of merging it with maybe, let's say, sportswear, so as a jumper. And this is kind of becomes a really easy piece to wear with a little bit of flash and a little bit of shine. And she's wearing it with a pair of khadi pants, a classic pleat pant. So, again, looking at the visual language around the country, drawing from it, putting your own take on it, and then this is what happens. Yeah.
Just so people watching are clear, Shisha means mirror.
Yes.
And there are textile traditions in, as you said, Gujarat and Rajasthan area today that use small round mirrors or some sort of mirror work and stitch it into the clothing. And so what you're seeing here is a series of small mirrors that have been stitched into the black top, right?
Yes, hand embroidered. We would put the fabric on a frame, on a flat frame, and several, karigars, artisans will sit around it, and they'll just, this is how it happens in my studio. But if you go into Gujarat or Rajasthan, often it's women who are doing it, and they'll hold it in their hand and they will be
Stitch around it to hold the mirror in, right?
Exactly. Yes.
But in this case, the pattern of that mirror work is very much you, and very much about clean lines and sort of more modern aesthetic.
Yes. Yes. There's one other element, I mean, and you can kind of see it is the yoke of a let's say of a kurta, or or abo or a tunic, and often this yoke sort of layout or structure, that we find. I've taken that and I often sort of put that into garments, and I sort of embellish around it. And again, it's nothing, completely new, but it's about doing your own take on it, and creating a sort of a pattern and a line work around it. So this is kind of, she has that little bit of a yoke happening here.
So it's evoking a historical shape.
Yes. Great. I'll go on. All right, so here we are. So this is the Bihar sari dress, and this is the sari dress that I was talking about, which I didn't intend it for us to become the thing for for the Rashmi Varma brand, but it certainly it worked for so many women for so many different reasons. And so this is a version that I did for collection 2 called the Bihar sari dress. And here I worked with natural indigo, and because of the color is just stunning and gorgeous, but I also wanted to sort of start exploring, and I need to do it further, is looking at indigo history in India, especially in Bihar. Bihar is where my family is from, and it's sort of very tumultuous and violent history, the forced growth of indigo, by the British, and what that the effects that it had on the land and on the farmers, and hence the name, the Bihar sari dress. This is kind of sort of my foray into sort of starting to think about its history, and I certainly need to do a little bit more with future collections. But this dress basically then became part of the Fabric of India show at the Victoria and Albert Museum in 2015, and it's now part of their permanent collection. And this was exhibited sort of in their last room of contemporary saris, and this is our version of a sari. Well, no, this is not our version of a sari. This is our sari dress. It's not a sari. It's not a dress. But it of course, it fits in really nicely with other saris next to it. So that was in 2015. And
Well, here is maybe I'd like to have you talk a little bit about some of the historical references that you do use or get inspired by in the history of Indian art. And we were talking before, I think, one of the things that I have always found very unique with you is that, when sort of over the years when we knew each other, while I was at the ROM, I would find you sitting in the library and looking at books on Indian art history. And, I didn't come across any other artists or designers or fashion people sitting in our library looking at books on historical Indian art. And so I think that you've, always had that affinity, and there's been some interest, in where research becomes part of your design process. And so, I want you to talk a little bit about that, these specific references that you're inspired by or are making. And in some ways, these images are part of that too.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think I'll go back a little bit to, I think when we were again younger, and we would, my family and I would go visit India. And once I became old enough, my sister and I, for us to sort of travel on our own and start discovering things on our own, one place, of course, would be going to the museum, to the NGMA or the Lalit Kala Academy. And again, you're looking at art, you're studying it, you are learning through of your own history through the visual arts. And so that's always been, really important to me. And I guess maybe, as much as I could, sit in front of a book and pour through the images and, look at everything from the way they're dressed, of course, to the technique, to the narrative of the image. It's always been, really fascinating. So, I'm constantly looking at, of course, at art, be it historical or contemporary. And these two images I decided to pull up for, today because, I mean, there's several reasons that I'm looking at it, but I think I pulled these two up because I'm looking at them, for so many reasons. One being what they're wearing, the what they're wearing, the poses that they're in, the technique that's used, and of course, Deepali, you had posted this image from your, which you had featured in your book, the painted photograph of a woman.
The one on the left with the woman in the blue sari.
The one on the left, exactly. And I mean, it is such a incredibly beautiful and evocative image. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a woman, an Indian woman in that pose. I mean, forget about what she's wearing for 2 seconds, but that pose that she has, like, and you sort of talked about it, and maybe you can kind of talk about it now, as why she's posing that way. So that was really fascinating for me. And then you start looking at the details of, her sari and her very Victorian blouse and lace and the structure. And this is a really wonderful example then of that structure and drape that come together so, wonderfully. And this is something that I, like to draw from, structure and drape. And as you had said before, that drape also has its own structure, and how the two come together. So it's just so many layers in this image that I really loved. And this is something that you had posted, I think, just very recently. So it's one of my new favorites. And so thank you for that. And then on the right is a gouache, a Tanjore painting. And, these are the paintings, of course, during the British colonial era, these ethnographic, paintings and drawings and paintings of, different types of people and caste that they were noting down, painting. Sorry.
Yeah. I'll just say that the one on the left is a painted photograph, and it's something in the Ram's collection that I had published in a book called Embellished Reality. And I think her pose has a lot to do with the fact that it was created during the colonial period. And it's part of the colonial gaze where she kind of is, posed in a way of being on display. So in some ways it's an ethnographic image as well. Mm-hmm. But showing someone who is now wearing a Victorian blouse, style blouse with the sari. And in the past, blouses weren't necessarily worn with saris, and they sort of came in with more Victorian moral values. And so, it's an image that's showing quite a moment of transition in South Asian culture. Mm. And I think these kinds of historical references, I think you have one more image, perhaps we'll go through that quickly. And
yeah. I mean, the other thing I wanted to add is, you're talking about transition and sort of, again, different cultural gazes coming. Well, this is one, or the colonial gaze onto it, but I also then the confluence of cultures and ideas, and I'm constantly also looking at, those things through art or architecture or through textiles and garments, is and that's been happening since the beginning of time. And that's what makes, I think my work, so for me to do that, it's so much more exciting, is that you can constantly be bringing all these different ideas together, and you produce your own thing. Nothing is creative out of a vacuum, but if you look at it as that, I'm taking an idea from here, there, and suddenly you are at this confluence, or you are at a a hybrid. I don't want to use the word fusion because I hate that word, but talk about hybrids and confluences. So, and again, just the painting on the right, the gouache painting, I love it. It's a great resource for me as to how the sari is draped on her and the drape of his dhoti. Yeah, so just continuing on with visual art and in this case sculpture and architecture, and how that also influences what I do. We have the Mrinalini Mukherjee sculpture here on the left, and a image of the Govind Dev temple in Vrindavan, which I recently visited. And both, I think, for their sculptural forms, their structure, the sense of drape in Mrinalini Mukherjee's piece, and then the repetition and the geometry that we're also seeing in the temple. The two together, for me, I mean, I think, again, you know, I'm constantly drawing from these kind of ideas into my own work: geometry, repetition, drape. And so, you know, the Mrinalini Mukherjee piece I've been in love with for such a long time. And then very recently, like I said, I went to see this Govind Dev temple in Vrindavan, which the reason I went to see it, because it actually is a really beautiful blend of Hindu and Islamic architecture. It's not the best image, but again, it's about, you know, the coming together of two, you know, ideas and aesthetics, and, you know, the harmonious sort of feel that you have to the piece. So, and I think it's really important that we look at this history and we recognize that, you know, these things have existed and continue to exist within the subcontinent.
And the architectural lines on the Govind Dev temple, which is a temple dedicated to the Hindu god Krishna in Vrindavan, is so strong that it's easy to see the echoes of it in Mukherjee's sculpture, textile-based sculpture, and I think also in your work. Now, Rashmi, you know, you're not only a fashion designer, but you're also an author.
Yes.
And you recently, not recently so much anymore, but have published a book with your co-author Swapna Tamhane, who's also an artist and a curator. And so can you just tell us about that book? And I think it really reveals some of the ways you look at visual culture and the things you're interested in.
Certainly. So here's SAR, The Essence of Indian Design, which...
Such a beautiful cover, I gotta say.
Yes, we love it, we love it. And this was, I'll just open it to, somewhere. So this actually began as a conversation between Swapna and I about maybe 10 years ago. And, you know, we had just returned from a trip from India, and we were sitting at a cafe in Toronto drinking tea and coffee, and we were looking at the cups, and we were actually missing, I think, the chai cups that you see here on the right. And, you know, that got us into, you know, conversation about objects and design, and objects that maybe we took for granted growing up, or, you know, took for granted just visiting India, or objects that we were really interested in. And we felt that there wasn't a comprehensive book, and not that this is actually, no, I shouldn't say that this is a comprehensive book, but there was not enough, you know, books out there on objects, on material culture. There was, you know, of course, a lot on visual art, a lot on textiles, architecture, but there wasn't a lot we found on, you know, objects that were sort of created in India, or created for an Indian market, or, you know, and things, objects that were handmade or machine made. So, and that conversation between us started 10 years ago, and then it, you know, it finally happened. And in 2015, we spent, you know, 6 months traveling around India with photographer Pratna Singh, looking for 200 objects, which we featured in this book, and looking for these objects, photographing them, you know, in their environments. And, you know, this is like a proposition, a proposal of what could be Indian design. This is a starting point for us. And, you know, of course, the list could go on and on and on. You know, we had to narrow it down to 200. But like you said, Deepali, I mean, for all the time that I've been going to India and now working in India, it is really about how you look at the everyday, and, you know, how you're looking at things around you, and that gaze that you might have. And, you know, it's my own personal gaze. It's not better, it's not worse. It's just my own. And we're looking at things that we find beautiful, or we find interesting, or that have, you know, whatever, like a history to us that we need to discuss, we need to talk about. And so this was like a really great collaboration that we did. And it's a beautiful book.
The book brings together in some ways what I'd call the aesthetics of the everyday. And you can see that here, from the chai cup and the chai cup holder.
Yes.
To the ambassador car.
Yes.
Which was the dominant car in India before it opened to international exports. And the Art Deco inspired design of old cinema studios, which is the other thing you see here, I believe.
Yes, the Golcha.
Other things that are in your book are like the aluminum tiffin boxes that you find in India.
like,
Those
textiles.
kinds of things, the ways,
I'll just,
the
I'll just open it to some random page. There's the belna, the roti belna. Yeah, it's I think, it's just about looking at things every day that you might take for granted. You might actually not consider this a design, that somebody or or not one particular person, but maybe generations of people have been working on these objects, designing these objects, thinking about it. And like I said, it's a proposal of what can we start considering as Indian design, and or design from the south, from the subcontinent. And the same thing with the garments. I mean, a lot of the garments, I think, just draw from the everyday garment. Again, the sari, the salwar kameez, the churidar, for example, and we just kind of, and with fabrics that are also very accessible, and then you begin from there, and then you kind of take off. And so material culture, garments. I also curated a show at the Serendipity Arts Festival in 2018 called Matters of Hand, and I focused on objects that were handmade. Objects made by designers and artisans, objects made by artisans themselves. So the craft, I think, dialogue is also, very important to me, and there's so much more that needs to be done and explored.
What's next for you, Rashmi?
Well, I think we're all sort of right now in the COVID, a little bit of the COVID vortex of, what's going to happen next. Well, we've put the studio on hiatus for a little bit. And I'm currently in Canada. I think I just want to wait out and see how things go with returning back to India. I spoke about the sari dress earlier, and because of the success, the success that we've had with the sari dress, I decided with a partner of mine, Malika Verma Kashyap of Border and Fall, that we would start a new brand of just the sari dresses. That's called Kumari. And that's sort of like more fun and accessible brand. And, it's not about all the handmade and the handcraft, but it's really about, again, bringing this great garment, to a much wider group of people, women, men, whoever wants to wear it. And, looking at upcycling, that's a big thing in Kumari, upcycling old saris, and of course designing new sari dresses. So that's happening there. And, I certainly want to go back and finish up collection 6 on Rashmi Varma. And, I continue on this journey that I'm on, this crazy journey that took me there and has allowed me to do all this like incredible and fun work. India is a big studio for me.
So the Kumari brand of for the sari dress means that it will then be available in certain retail stores now too, right?
Yes. And we really want to focus also on making it more accessible, available here in North America, outside of India. So definitely like online, within stores, and Rashmi Varma is going to continue, and this way, Kumari and Rashmi Varma really allows me to focus on all the things that we talked about earlier, and Kumari is really about just this one incredible dress, and so the two kind of
bringing it to a wider audience.
Exactly. Yes.
And, that's great. Thank you so much, Rashmi, for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.